decision-making power to say no to being a son of Pharaoh's daughter. That is, it was his decision of faith to say, call me a Hebrew. He had the choice. No one made him identify himself as a Hebrew. He could have lived as a prince of Egypt, whatever. But these words, look at the words, choosing, verse 25, esteeming, verse 26, respect, these words are all choice words. He made a decision of faith. He decided, I will not be a prince of Egypt any longer. I will not live as identified as the son of Pharaoh's daughter. I want to show you why this is an awesome faith decision this morning and what the application of this faith situation is to you. And put yourself in Moses' shoes for a moment, and then at the end only the punch will come. But wait for it. Allow yourself to get into Moses' mind, and you'll see what an incredible decision it was. On one side, he had this choice. He's got a choice on this side and a choice on this side. It's one or the other, okay? It's just one choice, but one side or the other. On one side in verse 25 and 26, I want to read them again so to get you back in his mind. Verse 24, by faith Moses, when he was come to years, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he had respect unto the recompense of the reward. These verses are about this choice he made. On the one side, in verse 25 and 26, he can choose the pleasures of the sin of Egypt and the treasures of Egypt. It's handy that they rhyme. Pleasures and treasures. Pleasures and treasures. On the other side, over here, he could choose something else. He could choose this, or he could choose over here this. And what's on this side? Well, he could choose the suffering, affliction with the people of God, and the reproach of being identified with Christ. Which would he choose? All of you are very spiritual people, and you say, Pastor, there's just no choice here, okay? You can just keep all that gold and all that luxury over there. I'm going to choose Jesus. Give me a break. Everyone who identified with Jehovah, every one of his brethren were in affliction. He must have felt like he escaped. He must have felt like, look how privileged and how wonderful I have excelled above all my brethren. Would he not have also maybe thought, God has really blessed me and put me in this exalted position? Now, there's a spiritual thought, and you can keep your gold too. You have to understand what a great choice this was. I want to really put you in his mind, because it would have been easy to choose to remain a prince of Egypt, thinking that God had given you that position, and you actually justify it, that you can help the Hebrews by being on the inside of the administration. And maybe even free them one day. I mean, if things work out right, and maybe I, kill my half-brother or something, I can maybe be Pharaoh. That is logical to help your people. It's logical that maybe God put you in that position. But it's not faith. That's right. It's not full of faith. Why? In that scenario, he would be forced to identify himself with everything that God was not. By staying in that makeup, and by staying in that role, by staying in that position, by identifying with that mother and with that grandfather who was Pharaoh, little g God of Egypt, he would be identifying himself with everything that God was not. To compromise in that position would promote huge anti-God ideas. Consider what he had to say no to make this decision of faith. And maybe you'll see even clearer how hard this decision would have been. It says that he left the enjoyment of the pleasures of sin for a season. He could have had Egypt's sin the whole rest of his lifetime and lived there at the palace among the opulence. In the ancient Egyptian culture, morality was mandated by the ethics and the action of the present king. His grandfather determined what morality was. Anything basically went. He was the grandson of the guy who determined whatever was right and wrong, not only in this life, but for the afterlife in the thinking of the Egyptians. How Pharaoh acted is how the people acted, and expect to be judged by the gods in their afterlife. Pharaoh had many wives. Pharaohs were viewed as little g gods, as gods. Now, we say little g. To them, it wasn't. They were viewed as gods sent down from heaven. They were considered gods and treated in their palaces with extravagant gluttony and luxury and pleasures unmentionable. You know the picture that everyone kind of, cartoons and things like that. Someday, I'm going to be here. I'm going to be so rich and powerful that I'm going to have people fanning me and feeding me grapes and dressing me and all this stuff. This is the life of the Pharaoh and his princes. This is reality. The man didn't even dress himself. He was so taken care of. He was fed. He was viewed as a god. And this is what, and hi, I am a god. They believed in many gods. I am a god, and this is my grandson Moses. That is what he's walking away from. When people walk by, when he walked by the Pharaoh, people fell to their faces. His family, they were descendants of gods. Moses would have been considered a descendant of God. Wow. I mention this to you because this is the lifestyle that Moses forsook. He made the decision to give up all of this by refusing to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. As a grandson of a god, every known pleasure of the body and life would have been freely his. Yet, when he thought this through, living within this experience, and said no to it, because of the great faith of what the Lord Jehovah was, he was making the decision to leave all behind and to believe something invisible, something that did not play out, something that he could not see. It was a huge decision. It revealed his heart of faith towards God and what God had said in the past. Understand that his people were under bondage. They were servants at the hands of Pharaoh. Moses was given a golden opportunity to exceed all of his people. He had the opportunity of pleasures that common men only dream of, that sinful men fantasize about. He had it all. It was all right for him in that culture of the fulfillment of sinful pleasures to his heart's desire. No limitations, no law, no expectation in any way. Whatever he wanted to enjoy in any way was his. But he said no to the pleasures of sin in Egypt. And he also said no to the treasures in Egypt. Look at verse 26, esteeming the reproach of Christ greater riches than the treasures in Egypt. Moses was Pharaoh's grandson, and by tradition shared his wealth with him. And most of the Pharaoh's burial places have been long time pillaged, and all the stuff is gone. But on November 4th, I want to give you an idea of what he left behind. Well, November 4th of 1922, an archaeologist named Howard Carter found a step. In a beat-up archaeological dig, there was a step. And that step led to the tomb of a boy pharaoh named King, I can't pronounce his whole name, but you know it and I know it as King Tut. He was a boy. It's Tutankhamun. What is it? Yell it out. What is it? Yeah, see, you all are wrong too. See, ask the Egyptian. All right. To give you an idea of what Moses rejected in faith and what he left behind, this is a boy king. Can you understand that he would not have accumulated the wealth of other pharaohs yet? He was a boy. And to understand that this is only what he was buried with. This is not his treasure. This is just what they said, okay, bury him with that. All right? This is not the bulk of his treasure. To give you an idea, just the golden items they buried this boy with is worth, I checked it out, got the latest number, $680 million of gold in his tomb. His coffin alone weighed 2,500 pounds and was made of solid gold and worth $13 million. Just what they buried him in. This wealth and opulence is what Moses walked away from and said, I will not be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now let that sink in as you watch Moses struggling on his knees with Jehovah in his bedchamber, poring over Hebrew history and what had been handed down to him through probably voice of stories of his ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph, and the promise of them of a promised land in Israel, of the seed coming of Messiah that would come and bless the world, that would be the Redeemer. We know that he knew all of these facts eventually, if not